Welcome to Summon Your Superhuman. I'm your host, Ria Mestiza, and today we have a live interview. And my very special guest today, her name is Cherrie Adams, and she is just a phenomenal woman. I'm so pleased that I get to introduce you all to her. She is an author. She is also a counselor. I love her business name. It's Mrs. Haverschat Counseling. I mean, welcome to the show,
Oh,
Cherrie.
thank you, Ria. What a lovely introduction. Thank you.
Please tell us the story of Mrs. Haverschat Counseling.
Okay, so when I was younger, I'm talkative apparently, and when I was younger, my dad used to call me Mrs. Haverchat. Um, I didn't start my business until about 4 years ago,
Right.
and just felt that as a counselling business, to register it as Mrs. Haverchat seemed incredibly appropriate and a bit of a nod to my dad. So thanks, Dad, for giving me my business name.
It's perfect and I love it. It's straight to the
Thank
point.
you.
There's no ifs or buts about it.
Yeah.
All right, fantastic. So the reason why we're chatting today is because it's Grey in May.
Yes.
And as a lot of you already know, I've been promoting Brain Cancer Awareness Month, and the reason I know you is because your book, Critters Choice, is one. It's a spectacular read. It's a short read, so if you don't love reading too, it's not that long. But
I think it's 42 minutes.
42 minutes.
It's 42
All
minutes.
right. But it's a book. It's a tribute to her son, and it's also a book that's raising money for brain cancer research via the NRF fund. So,
Indeed.
so talk to us about. I mean, you've written a few books, and these are all after Christopher's passing.
Yes.
So please introduce us to who Christopher is.
Right. So Christopher was the youngest of our three very magnificent and gorgeous sons. And he was 25 when he was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. And the diagnosis suggested he would get 3 to 5 years. And that would include surgery and chemotherapy and radiation, all the usual suspects, things that they do for brain cancer. But unfortunately, Christopher died just after his 26th birthday, 11 months after diagnosis.
Wow.
So I'm really mindful that he is not defined by the last 11 months of his life. He was larger than life, both physically and his personality. He was all-embracing, all-encompassing of everything. And whilst that in many ways was a great attribute, it meant that he pushed the boundaries pretty solidly as well. So to be the parents of such a child was confronting at times. But in hindsight, I guess I have some understanding now that he had 26 years to fit in what most of us think we've got 85 or 90 years to do. So, yeah, he was a busy boy.
So he had your beautiful blue eyes.
Ah.
As far as I know, I've seen the photos, and he does.
Thank you.
And he was an athlete. He was very into football. Even in the book, obviously clearly he loves football.
Yeah, loved sport, loved the gym.
Yeah,
loved his body. He used to tease his older two brothers that he was taller than them. He had bigger muscles than them. He was more handsome than them. Ego was a big word for Christopher.
Yep.
Yeah, well, but he loved going to the gym, and yes, he captained his old scholars football team. He co-captained that, and was on the committee. So yeah, all of that was part of what he loved to do.
Fantastic. And I did notice, and I wasn't sure. So when you gave me this book and I read it, and I wasn't sure what to expect.
No.
Right. Because it's called Critters Choice, and it's actually a really cute story how the name came about.
Yes.
Right, I'll let you tell it because I think it's
so as I said, Christopher's the youngest of our three sons. So the next brother up, Russell, was only about 20 months when Christopher was born, and we came home and we said, "This is your new little baby brother, and his name's Christopher." And Russ just went, "Christa," and we went, "No, Christopher," and he said, "Critter." And there's that idea of a self-fulfilling prophecy almost, or does a name fit? And Critter by name and Critter by nature, there was absolutely And although that was our family nickname for him,
Mm-hmm.
it was just interesting how other people would pick up and run with it. And when he was about 16, I remember saying to him, Critter, would you prefer that we now start calling you Chris or Christopher, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And he was kind of quite appalled. He said, no, this is my family name. Like, this is, and everyone knows me as Critter. So the book had to be Critter if I'd changed the title to Christopher's something or other.
Yeah.
I'm sure people wouldn't have known who I was talking about.
Yeah. No, fair enough.
Yeah.
So keeping with the theme of Brain May and brain awareness.
Yes.
Brain cancer awareness.
Yes.
There has been a lot I've learned and a lot I've been trying to communicate as well via the podcast and via social channels so people can understand as much as we can understand, because there is still so much we don't know.
Absolutely.
And so when you say that he was diagnosed at the age of 25, so how did that come about? How was that even, on the cards?
How did
it come to light is what the word I'm...
Yes, yeah. Well, because he was fit and healthy and young and, had no health issues, he started getting headaches. And it was November of 2014, and he had just finished his degree at university, and he hated every day of that degree of studying. So he was like so excited that part of his life was finished.
Yeah.
And footy had just finished, but they were kind of doing some pre-season stuff. Anyway, he had a few headaches, and then he started getting nausea, becoming nauseous. And because he's a 25-year-old male, I would say, do you want to go to the doctor and have this checked out? No, it's cool. His oldest brother, Maddie, was married in the December of that year. And I'm so grateful now, looking back on that we were all so well, we didn't know what was going to happen 4 weeks later. So in January, he went to the doctor, and my husband and I were in Sydney visiting my dad. And he rang me and he just said, I don't want you to freak out. Now, if anyone has a child that starts a sentence, or a partner or a colleague that says, I don't want you to freak out.
Yeah.
He said, but I've been to the doctor and he sent me for a scan and they found something on my brain. So the lead up to it was reasonably innocuous. A few headaches, a few weeks apart, a bit of nausea. What they found, of course, was that he had a grade 3. It's called an anaplastic astrocytoma.
Wow.
It was in his parietal and occipital lobes on the right-hand side. And the prognosis for that is about a 3 to 5 year survival rate. So, yeah, no reason why our son developed brain tumour, which was malignant.
Yeah.
And because you've now had some awareness around this, Ria, the statistics are horrendous. Horrendous.
They are.
Brain tumours and brain cancers take young children more than any other disease.
Yeah.
They take more people under 40 than any other cancer. And the truth of it is, in 40 years plus, there has been no change in the way we manage brain cancer or brain tumours. And that is unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
The funding is minuscule. Government funding is minuscule. And the reason for that, if you're going to ask me,
let's do it. Yeah.
It sounds really awful, but the truth of it is, because we don't have enough survivors, we don't have enough good stories, whereas some other cancers, thank goodness, we have ploughed millions of dollars into them, and we're getting these magnificent outcomes, and we're getting good survival rates.
Yeah.
And we're getting lots of survivors, saying, because we had this piece of machinery or this research grant or these laboratories, we've had these outcomes. We don't have enough people surviving. So we have to change the thought process, and we have to change the conversation around that.
Yeah.
It's not good enough to say we will throw a bunch of money here because we know we get better results.
Yeah.
We need a lot more funding. We need a lot more awareness. I'm a bit passionate about this.
Well, of course I can, yeah, absolutely. And well, that makes me pleased that I'm starting to share the stories.
Oh, I'm so grateful. So grateful.
So if that's a way of helping, and growing that awareness, I want people to understand. And that's the thing with the symptoms.
Yes.
Is they aren't that clear.
No.
Because headaches is a very common. Everyone gets headaches.
Yes. The beautiful woman that you interviewed the other day, Naomi.
Mm-hmm.
She was being treated for sinusitis.
Yeah.
For ages.
Yes.
I'm involved with a brain tumour support group here in Adelaide,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of those stories are around a little bit of loss of balance, maybe a little bit of tingling, but it goes away.
Yeah.
Headaches, nausea, a feeling of just being a little bit disconnected, a bit brain foggy. All of these independently do not really set off alarm bells.
No.
So therein lies the dilemma of the insidiousness of this, because it can be quite seemingly what's the word I'm after? Unremarkable, symptoms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of the scary thing about it, is because when Naomi was diagnosed, I started to research it. I wanted to know more about it. And I was like, well, there doesn't seem to be that much information.
Absolutely.
Here. And and you can't even be like, oh, you get a headache, go get checked out. It's like, well, there are other reasons why you get a headache. Brain fog. There are other reasons you get, brain fog. Like,
yes,
it's such an inconclusive information that is available.
Absolutely.
But so back to Critter.
Yes.
So he's 25. He's now had the scan. They found grade 3, which we learnt, through last week's episode. 3 to 5 years. So what was the next steps? What happened?
He was diagnosed on the Tuesday or Wednesday. I think he had a biopsy on the Thursday to confirm the diagnosis.
Right.
And I remember his 2 brothers lived interstate at the time. So they were in town. The family was gathered, and his neurosurgeon, who is the most remarkable woman, truly remarkable woman, Amal Abu Hamdan, little plug there, Amal. She gathered us in Christopher's room in the hospital, and she just said to him what it was. She's an incredibly empathetic soul. And it was just curious what he heard, because she said, this sort of tumour, unfortunately, you won't get decades, right? But what he heard was, you will get decades. So he turned to Amal and he went, oh, well, that's not so bad. That's good. That's good. I've got decades. And we're all sort of looking one to the other thinking, oh, my God, he didn't hear her. And she just said very gently, no, Chris, not decades. And I just remember him looking at her and saying, well, that's shit. And it was shit. So he had the biopsy. He then had brain surgery, which was about an 8-hour surgery. He was so well after that. It was frightening. He had lots of tubes and things attached to him, and the nurses wanted to bring him a catheter. Probably a catheter, but for him to be in bed to do what he needed to do. And he was like this bionic man. He just got out of bed and started walking with all these tubes, and they're going, oh, wow. No, sit down. Yeah. So he got through the surgery really well. And then the usual protocol then is chemotherapy and about 7 weeks of radiation.
Right.
So he tolerated those really well. The radiation and the chemotherapy bring a lot of fatigue, but then you're on steroids to stop the brain swelling. So he got this, the steroid look, which was, quite swollen. And because he quite valued his physical body, he was a bit, concerned about that. And that sounds a bit vain and frivolous, but I think the truth of it was, losing the hair was okay, but he felt then that he looked like he was unwell, even though he, struggled to be so well. Then we got to June and we had a couple more scans, and what they picked up looked like, they call it radiation necrosis. So it's the scar tissue. So that was good news. The tumour what had been left, which was maybe about 10%, hadn't regrown. But then he started getting some seizures about August. So there were some warning bells there that things
Yeah.
might not be so good. Another biopsy, another scan,
Mm-hmm.
and then the final biopsy revealed that he actually had a GBM elsewhere in his brain. So it was separate to the
Wow.
astrocytoma, and that, and I won't say too much about that, but
Mm-hmm.
that would have given him a very, very short months.
Mm.
Months.
Mm-hmm.
He passed before that happened.
Wow.
Mm, mm.
Far out. Yeah, this you know, it sounds like it was, I mean, it's a short period of time, and it's also not a short period of time,
Mm.
because those 11 months would have really felt, would have been a heavy 11 months.
Absolutely.
And this book is something that you wrote obviously after his passing, which is why when I said that, it wasn't what I expected it to be, because you almost feel like when someone writes about someone when they pass, it's almost going to be like a bit of a biography,
Yes.
or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. And you wrote it really beautifully. Like, it was almost like uh you had fun with it. It was like fiction brought to life, right? And then
Yeah.
it was, and then him telling his story
Yes.
beyond, before and beyond. I don't know. I don't want to give too much away, but
Yeah,
like
I
it was
know.
just really, really, really creative,
Oh,
and
thank you.
and
Thank you.
beautifully written. So
No.
when we met and you said that you're not often lost for words, I take that even more as a compliment now, considering you're a woman of many words.
Oh, thank
But
you.
it's a beautiful book, and this book, all proceeds do go to the NRF fund, as you had, yep,
Yes.
correct.
Yeah.
And so I invite you all to, please, if you can, the book is available, but you will need to contact Cherrie directly, and I
Sure.
will put her email in the show notes. So please, if you can get in touch with her, get a copy of the book.
Yeah.
It's not a lot. What is it? How much is it?
Oh, it's $20.
$20.
For May. It's a May special because it's
Oh,
Go Grey
okay.
in May.
Oh, all right then. Get onto it, people.
But the other thing was too, just in that, about, you said you thought maybe it was a biography or whatever. I was so determined that I didn't, as I say, define him by that last 11 months, but I needed a way to find a way to let him leave us. That was really the premise of why I wrote it the way I did, because, and hence the word choice. For my own maternal grief,
Yeah.
I needed to find a way to reframe. I wasn't clever enough as a writer to not, clearly he had to pass.
Yes.
But I really needed to find a way to let him do that on his own terms. And I think, there's a little part in there where I just talk about, him being determined about who he is.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would love you to share that little part, because
Okay.
prior to coming here, you did say that there was a little section of the book that was calling to you.
Yeah. I probably should have got my glasses out. Can I just zip over
Yeah,
here?
absolutely. Absolutely. All right, cool. So while she's doing that, I will mention that reading it, she had this really beautiful way of incorporating his personality into the book. And so even though it's not a biography,
No.
but he cleverly, dosed it in, and the football, he really has it. He really appreciates his friendship groups.
Absolutely.
And family and friends and
Very
connection
important.
is very important to him.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that you did a wonderful job.
Okay. So he's in hospital. This is the last section of the book. So I close my eyes and I let the pain wash over me. It is unrelenting yet familiar. It has been my companion on and off for many months now. It is the messenger that speaks of unwellness and life changes. It is not welcomed. I hear the door open again and the clanging of a metal trolley. I open my eyes to see Sam standing there. He is my nurse in this ward, and he's a champion bloke. He has dreadlocks tied back in a band, an earring and a nose piercing. He wears a red string on his wrist and a crystal around his neck. He's a pretty cool guy. The last time I was in here, about a month ago, he came in at the end of his shift with a family-sized meat lovers pizza and 2 cans of Coke. We pigged out on the pizza and watched the cricket together. like I said, champion bloke. He talks to me like I'm a regular guy. He says I should try meditation and maybe get into yoga. And if I want to try it once I'm discharged, he'll pick me up and take me to the place that he goes. He reckons it will help settle my monkey mind. That's what he calls it. You know, that incessant chatter that just won't bugger off? Mum and Dad have suggested it too, but somehow hearing it from a guy more my age makes more sense to me. I think I might try it once I'm discharged. Hi, mate, he says while picking up something from the trolley. I hear you're running a bit rough this morning. He casts his cautious eye in my mum's direction. She's busy studying her coffee. A slight smirk sits on her orange-lipped, sticked mouth. Yes, Sam, I reply. I'm feeling bloody ordinary. Let's see what we can do about that. I will pop into the guest lounge for a bit, says my mum, and give Dad a call. I'll leave you to it. Sam checks my temperature, normal, blood pressure, a bit low, checks my IV and asks a few questions. He shines a light into my eyes and writes something on my chart. Then, finally, he picks up the syringe and administers some pain relief. It should kick in pretty soon, he says. I'll come back in an hour or so to check on you, buddy. I lie back on the pillows and think about my latest surgery. Another exploration followed by a few anxious days while we wait for the latest results. I feel so angry. It's so bloody exhausting trying to keep positive when the statistics tell a different story. Still, they are just statistics, and I am not. I'm Critter, and I like to do things my way.
I love that. I love that. And so much of his strength does come through in your writing, in what appears like it's like he's telling the story. It really does feel like he's telling the story. How fantastic. And you've said that he had that strong personality, like even going through all of that, and you were in the middle of your studies.
I was
still.
Yes.
And just when you were almost like giving up hope and you're like, oh, maybe I'll just forget it, I won't worry about it, and what did he say to you?
Well, yeah, I mean, that year 2015, my husband had just taken a job interstate, and I was in my final year of my studies. And I remember clearly that conversation. My husband and I had talked privately, and he said, look, I won't take the job. I need to be here for you guys. And I said, look, I'll put my studies on hold. And then I went to Christopher and said, this is what we're thinking of doing. And he just turned to his father and he said, this is your go to retirement job. You should go out. You should go out with a bang, not a whimper, because it was quite a good job.
Yeah.
So you need to do that. And he said, and I don't need you and Mum both sitting here looking at me sad. So Dad, go and do that. And then he turned to me and I said, but I can defer my studies, Christopher. I can do that. And he said, Mum, you don't get to use my cancer diagnosis as a fucking excuse to give up your studies. He said, you're a gunner, so you're not going to use me as an excuse. You're going to finish your studies. Well, I did. And little did I know at that point that I would open my own practice. I never, ever thought that would happen. And little did I know that those skills that I was learning in that course were actually so valuable for me and my family in this story.
That's incredible.
Yeah, he was pretty forthright.
Well, everything happens for a reason, and I really believe that. And like you said, you had to finish that off, and the skills that you'd learned, and then from that, this is where this book has come from.
Yes.
This is where the other writings that you've done have come from.
Yes.
There was it's not coming to mind right now, but is it the Fear and Courage piece that you wrote?
Yes. Yeah.
Let us know about that, because I mean that alone, fear and courage, is synonymous, right?
They are.
Like so
are.
what was that about? Give us a little.
So that was a competition that I entered, actually.
Oh, okay, cool.
It was on that great oracle called Facebook, and it was for women globally over 60 to present a piece. I've just forgotten how many words now, maybe 3,000 or 4,000 words. And they had 4 different genres, and the one that I selected was fear and courage. And I submitted and was lucky enough to be accepted to go into that publication. That came out in 2017, I think, or 2018.
Wonderful.
And so all the stories in that book are women over 60 globally that have shared a story about their association with fear and courage. But for me, it was very much a bit like that book, you know, feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yes, yeah.
And what is courage? You know, when people are diagnosed with an illness like this, or any illness that's, you know, potentially terminal, there's a perception that people say to you, you've got this, you should fight this, you know, you're bigger than this. And Christopher got a lot of that sort of reinforcement. And whilst that was beautiful and very encouraging, I started thinking about what is the antithesis of you've got this, you'll beat it. If you succumb to your disease, have you failed? Are you not a warrior? Have you let people down? And that really sat quite heavily with me for Christopher's journey. That not that people were trying to, you know, they're trying to encourage, but there's something about that word. And as you know, the language and the words we use are so powerful energetically. So I kind of wanted to reframe that to say, what is courage? And on Christopher's funeral card, we said, because we have a foundation called Strong Enough to Live for Christopher.
Yes, we're both
you have
wearing
got your
them,
band,
so
Strong Enough to
yes.
Live band. The full sentence is, you were given this life because you're strong enough to live it. But one of the things that we had on Christopher's funeral card was strong enough to live, brave enough to die.
Wow.
And that's kind of a strange thing for parents to put on who are farewelling a son.
Well, yeah.
Okay. And even as I say it now, I feel that check in my heart that goes, whew, you know, what do you mean by that? But it's I wanted to empower Christopher's departure. And for other people to say, whatever your journey is, you have to honor your journey your way. And yes, let's support people on their journeys, but sometimes saying less and doing more. And I'm a hugger, you know, so sometimes bringing the heart to it and leaving the words to one side might be more valuable to your loved one. So the Fear and Courage book spoke, my piece on it spoke a bit about that. What is courage? And it needs to be your definition of, not what you assume other people's definition or expectation is. You know, expectation is a very, very hard thing to navigate. Other people's expectations.
Yes.
Very hard thing to navigate.
Yeah. I be honest, it's not, it's even you saying that, it is the Aussie way almost to be like, you'll be right, mate. Right. You know, and it's, you don't think about what expectations and what that puts on a person to think, well, if, you know, if I can't fight this, am I a failure? Or and so being brave enough to die is so powerful.
So you just said that word then, and it's what we say. If I can't fight this, why do we talk about fighting cancer, fighting you know, multiple sclerosis, whatever it is? Why are we putting such an aggressive word to an aggressive disease? You know, I have a friend who's, you know, she's just my spiritual guru, really. And she always says, Cherrie, no matter what it is, throw love at it. Throw love at it, throw love at it. And I said, but sometimes I just don't feel like throwing love at it. And she goes, I know, Cherrie, I know. But when you come to it from that perspective, no matter what the situation is, you diffuse that really negative energy and you add the possibility that you can go to it more gently. And I think that that's where I have managed to come to in some way. With the loss of our son, it's never okay. It is never acceptable, and it's always painful. But can I come to it gently by saying, that is what happened in his time and space, in his journey, and we honor him by living our best lives. Like, his brothers are awesome men and his dad's an awesome man. They live their best lives. They live their fullest lives. They have families themselves. They have children themselves now. they bring such energy and kindness into the world. They were those people anyway, but it's accelerated that, I think.
Yeah.
You know, from the midst of devastation, you know, we find light.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Ah,
Sorry, I just went on there.
no, it's. I mean, I look. I'm not a parent, you know. So and to go through what you've gone through, it feels heavy for me, you
Of
know, because
course.
I
Yeah, it's a
and
sad thing.
it is it's tragic, and that's why, you know, even you wrote. I say he wrote, right, because like
Yeah,
it's in the book that, you know, he wants there to be more resolve for something like this for the future, for people that are diagnosed from, you know, here on out, to have more resolve. And
absolutely.
we absolutely need more funding, we absolutely need more awareness, um, to make that happen. And one of the things that this is for perhaps just my own curiosity,
Yes,
but his wish list,
yes.
look at this beautiful picture of him. Look at
Isn't he a handsome boy?
that. He had a wish list.
He did.
So is this his actual, did he write this?
He didn't write it down. Much
Uh-huh.
of it is things that he and I talked about.
Yeah, yeah,
And some of it is what I knew of him.
yeah.
So when he finished his degree,
Mm-hmm.
he wanted to go traveling that very next year. He'd lived overseas for 2.5 years when he was 19,
Mm-hmm.
and he wanted to go back. And he and his brothers, when he got diagnosed, they talked about hiking Everest Base Camp. Certainly the story about going camping at the Kimberleys, if I may.
Yes, of course. Go on.
He couldn't drive after his surgery because the left eye was compromised. And his surgeon, Dr. Amal, said, 6 months or so, we'll see if you can get your license back. So we're sitting in her surgery one day, and he said to her, Amal, are you going to give me my license back in January? This was early November. So he only died like 19 or so days after this conversation.
Wow.
And she said, I will reassess it in February, but what's the rush?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I want to get a dog, because we didn't have a dog then.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to do a camping trip up to the Kimberleys, and I want to take my dog, and I want to do that. And she said, well, even if you get your license back, I don't think I'd want you to do such a huge trip on your own.
Mm-hmm.
So is there someone that you would like to take? And she said, and you know, like, it's a big responsibility because your wellness after this might need to be monitored. And this very cheeky boy turned to her and said, so Doc, what are you doing in April? You know, how much safer would I be than going with my neurosurgeon?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
that was definitely one of the things. He wanted to be a dad, and this is the part that makes my heart feel so sad. He already had a nephew. My daughter-in-law Jen was pregnant with their second child at the time of Christopher's diagnosis, and he was just besotted with Archie, the one
his
nephew.
Yeah.
He really wanted to be a dad. So for him, you know, not to have lived to do that is one of those great tragedies. But you know, at his funeral, his brother said, if you're on Facebook, you will see something like 3,000 photos of Critter with Archie. I don't think it was that many, but yeah. But lots of the things that are in there are things that he talked about in the course of his life.
Did he get a dog?
No, he didn't. But we always had dogs.
Okay.
We had only lost a dog about 2 years before he passed.
Right.
But in that, friends of ours gifted us a healing dog after Christopher passed.
Wow.
And we still have the beautiful Leia with us now. And she is divine.
Lovely.
Truly divine.
And there's a lot of mention of number 19, you know, so
right.
it was his football number.
Yes.
So even to I would just read the number 4 point is on his wish list was to pull on my number 19 footy Guernsey and play footy again with my beloved Navy Blues. Maybe I will take a specky mark and then kick an impossible goal to clinch the grand final, in brackets. Well, Mum did say I could choose anything.
Christopher he went to Pulteney Grammar as a student, and he played for the Pulteney Old Scholars. And the boys always said that whilst he was fit, he was the fastest guy on the paddock. He was strong. He would take marks and whatnot, but he could not kick a goal for shit, right? Yes, his footy number was 19.
Mhm.
And when I started writing the book, I started to see that this number kept coming up. And when I looked into it, he died on the 19th of November.
Mm.
His footy number was 19. He was 19 when he moved overseas to Europe. I've used a little bit of poetic license here. There's close to 19 months between he and his brother in their age. It's closer to 20 than 19.
Yeah.
And so the part of the book in the front, which you will know,
Mm-hmm.
why that 19 in the very beginning of the book is quite significant.
Yeah.
And a nod to his footy club. They have retired his football number from the club, which means there will never be another number 19
Wow.
playing for the Old Scholars, the Pulteney Old Scholars. And they gifted to us a framed copy of his jersey, which is just so special. And he was so loved. You know, he connected with everybody, everywhere, always. So it must have been exhausting to be in his body, I think, to be in his heart. You know, he loved so largely and so profoundly, but his passions could take him, you know, the highest of highs and the lowest of lows.
Yeah.
You know, he ran that whole gamut. So yeah, it was a big life.
It seems it, you know, like, and just reading the book, seeing his picture and hearing you speak about him, I feel that he had a big heart and a big presence
Absolutely.
to be around.
Yeah.
And there's also some really beautiful illustrations as part of this book.
Oh, yes.
And forgive me if I'm incorrect, but
yes,
I did notice that you have a feather tattoo on your arm.
I do.
Is that some sort of representation
It
here?
is. Yep. So when you buy the book, you'll understand the feather reference. Yep. But yes, feathers became very much part of my story after my son passed. And the first feather that ever came into my consciousness was blue and grey and black. So I had the tattoo done, which is the infinity symbol with the feather, and it's life and love. So it's infinite life, infinite love. And the beautiful Lucinda Gregory, who illustrated this book, nod to you, Lucinda. She is a brain tumour warrior princess, I call her. Her tumour was in such a dangerous place in her spinal cord.
Right.
That Dr. Amal was her doctor as well. And the surgery left her with life, but compromised her right side somewhat. And she had been a pastry chef and an artist. So Lucinda, when I asked her if she would illustrate my book, she said, but I will have to draw it with my left hand and it might be a bit wonky. And I said, you know, your wonky is amazing. And you've seen the illustrations. So it took her a long time. It took me a long time to write it. But her work is so profoundly beautiful. And her spirit of generosity to gift me her work was amazing. So, you know, we have a shared journey around this. She never met Christopher. They were Facebook friends. And she was due to meet him on the Friday and he passed on the Thursday. So we became friends, and it's like we were meant to meet each other. Not he and her. Quite amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there was another piece that you wrote we started to talk about it, but I didn't want to dig too deep prior to recording this. But it's your piece about Gangs of Seven.
So that was the piece that I did for Fear and Courage,
the
Gang of Seven. So that was the book was called Fear and Courage. My piece was called Gang of Seven, which talks about fear and courage. The other piece we spoke about was the it's on psychology.com online, and that one's called When Grief Came to Town. And I kind of feel like that was quite raw. It was really early that I wrote that, and that talks about they say number 13 is an unlucky number. In 13 months, we lost my dad, our son, and my mum.
Wow.
So my parents didn't know about Christopher's illness. Christopher didn't want Dad to know because Dad had a terminal diagnosis, and my mother had advanced dementia. So there was no upsetting her by telling her that.
Mm.
So for me, I always felt like I hadn't given due process to the grief to my parents.
Mm.
And that weighed heavily for a time. So when I wrote this piece, I really talked about how grief stepped into our lives for 13 months and completely ambushed us and sideswiped us, really,
Mm.
and how each of those events um, sat individually, and how grief is so profoundly different. You know, I think we tend to generically call whatever it is that goes on as grief,
Yeah.
but it's a myriad of things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's incredibly multifaceted. So my grief journey around my dad was completely different to my grief journey around my mum, which was supremely different around my journey with my son.
Of course.
So that 13 months was the universe gave us a bit of a smack, really. But you know, we're strong enough to live.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah, grief is an interesting thing. And, you know, when we met, it was in April, and we already spoke about how May is a difficult month, you know,
yes, yeah,
and it's Mother's Day. There's
yes,
all of these things, you
yeah.
know, and
Well, it's my birthday in May.
yeah,
It's my mother's birthday in May. It's Mother's Day. I have a sister in May.
wow.
And then I just thought how ironic
Mm.
that out of all the months of the year that could be allocated for brain tumour and brain cancer awareness, it's the month of May.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some synchronicity around that, you know.
Yeah,
When we decided to fundraise on Christopher's behalf, he had already started the Strong Enough to Live Foundation. He
great.
got diagnosed on about the 7th or 8th of January,
Mm-hmm.
and he had a fundraiser on the 1st of February.
Wow.
And he and his mates, and you know, thumbs up to you, you lot, you're amazing. They raised about $8,000 or $9,000. And then after he passed, it was just like, how do we continue his work?
Mm.
So, under the banner of Strong Enough to Live, we do fundraise for NRF, who are here in Adelaide. And it's kind of our lifelong mission now. We've raised, you know, a good hunk of money through the generosity, love, care, and compassion of our tribe and the
Mm.
extended tribe.
Yeah,
And it's yeah, it's because Christopher started it. You
that's
know,
awesome.
it's his legacy ongoing, always.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, he is now the angel king over all of you, and you know it comes through so clearly in the book that the the closeness, he had such a closeness with his friends, you
Yes.
know, that were really there and supportive throughout everything. And
Absolutely. Absolutely.
it's so important to, you know, and how special that was to for him to, you know, I don't want to say get, you know, going through what he was going through, like really it's to have
Yes.
that, it's
Oh,
wonderful.
it's vital. You know,
Mm.
because he couldn't drive, and I
Yeah.
was still studying and needing to be different
Mm.
places and doing different things. You know, his friends would pick him up and take him to his radiation or chemo or whatever. There were lots of choices that he made during that 11 months. That as a helicopter distraught mother. I do feel, you know, in the truth of what I'm about to say to you, I do feel ashamed a little bit that sometimes I was quite critical of some of his choices. And you know, I'm a talkative Taurian, so he would know when my disappointment was apparent. But it was that care. You know, you need to care. You've got this horrible thing happening in you,
Mm.
but he still wanted to be a 25-year-old, 26-year-old, and I needed to remember that. And I think I've remembered it more in hindsight
Mm.
that he needed to go and be irresponsible sometimes and push the envelope and make some pretty ordinary choices. But having said that, Ria, his core of friends, his friendship group were amazing. And I guess they gave him enough rope, but always kept him safe.
Mm.
You know, it was hard to watch that journey for him. They were getting married, having babies, buying houses. That was not going to happen for him,
Yeah.
you know. But Yeah, he had and we continue to have such beautiful support by these lovely young people.
Mm, that's beautiful.
Mm,
So then, in light of Grey in May, and it is all about brain cancer awareness,
yes.
what are some other things that you, or perhaps you feel Critter would want us all to know about brain cancer and
Yeah.
as a whole?
Yeah. Um, Well, yeah, curiously, I would say, I mean, I think the first response might be, let's get lots of dollars for research. But
Mm-hmm.
but I'm also involved with an organisation in Victoria, which I'm answering your question, but just want to bring them
Of
in.
course, yes.
It's called Peace of Mind Foundation,
Mm-hmm.
and they're based in Geelong. And the lovely Beck Piccone, or it might be Piccone, sorry, Beck, she started this about 8 years ago when she lost a sister-in-law to brain cancer. And Bex and her brother, who started it, their philosophy was, yes, we need funds, but raising awareness is also about looking after the families of and the victims of brain cancer and brain tumours. So Peace of Mind Foundation does support for families,
Mm-hmm.
and they get a little bit of government funding and a lot of it through fundraising. And they do things like retreats. We've just had the bereavement retreat in March.
Yep.
The women's retreat is coming up in August. The men's retreat has just been had. So to answer your question, I think Christopher would say in part, yes, we need to have the funds,
Mm-hmm.
but we need to have all these other facilities in place. There's a young woman here in Adelaide who has 5 or 6 children, and she's on her own
Yeah.
and has a really tough journey with her brain cancer.
Oh dear.
The support networks, how do we support these families? How do we offer comfort, solace in that way, but how do we do it practically?
Mm-hmm.
The Brain Tumour Support Group here in Adelaide, they're currently knitting blankets to provide for people to have in hospital with them so that they can have a little metaphorical hug.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he was really concerned about also remembering that brain cancer often affects young people.
Yeah.
And how do young people navigate this journey knowing that they're not doing the things that other young people are doing?
Mm.
How do we support families that have been told that their 4-year-old is going to have a life of hospitalizations and surgeries with no guarantee of a positive outcome? So I think the kindness and being connected, which was a great attribute of Critters, and my other sons as well. They're very heart-based men.
Mm.
They understand about how important it is to talk,
Yeah.
to identify your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
I think providing space for people to be vulnerable in this journey is really important. Have a conversation, be available. Don't try and fix anything. You can't fix this.
Mm.
The person doesn't need you to fix them. The person needs you to let them be who they are. Let them have their journey, honor them
Mm-hmm.
for their choices, good, bad, or indifferent. I wish I had known that back then.
Mm-hmm.
That's my lesson. That's my lesson. For the month of May, it's the awareness of. Support it in any way you can. There's an organisation called, and I'm just going to look at my phone because I've just gone off my radar. Australia Brain Cancer Mission.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a national identity, and it incorporates lots of organisations like Carrie Bickmore's Beanie for Brain Cancer and the Mark Hughes Foundation and NRF and Cure Brain Cancer. So it's a national forum where the information is shared. We're not working in our own separate little backyards in our separate little states, keeping this information to self. It's to be explored, and there's a lot of money being raised to go there for the national the collective information, I guess.
Yep.
So whilst May brings awareness to it, anything that you can do, just read up about it, just Google it, just find out what brain cancer is, what brain tumours are. There's over 160 different types of brain tumours. So you can't have one treatment.
Wow.
It's almost like you have to tailor make your treatment. And I know the researchers at NRF are looking at the blood-brain barrier. Chemotherapy can't get in because the brain has been designed to protect itself.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, how do we trick the brain into saying, we'll let this in because this is good shit, right?
Yeah.
And we'll keep the other stuff out. Like, how do we
Yeah.
do that? And these incredibly dedicated and incredibly clever people are putting their heart and soul into this work, you know?
Yeah.
Profoundly wonderful people doing this work.
Well, that's good. I mean, thank goodness that they're there, and they're also passionate
Yes.
and dedicated to this mission.
Absolutely.
And thank you for sharing all of that. I think everything you said, it's all important, all of the different aspects, and yeah, it's just it 160 different types. I remember you said this to me when we met, and
Yes.
even that I was like, wow, I didn't know that. And I've been looking into this more. And so there's so much more to learn about it, and so much that needs to be done about it at the same time.
The thing too, Ria, if I may,
Please. Yes.
is that, we tend to talk about brain cancer. And I really want to say really clearly that if your diagnosis is that it's a benign tumor, generally people will say, oh, thank God for that, like it's benign, aren't you lucky? Well, no, it's something growing in your head that shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Like the beautiful Lucinda who illustrated this book, whilst hers was benign, the complications to her physically, emotionally, are real. And months and months and months and months of rehabilitation to learn how to walk again, to learn how to use her hands again. These are not, and like Naomi, these are not isolated stories. So benign really means, in some cases, a watch and wait. Some benigns change. So please be mindful that if people tell you this, whether it's a tumor anywhere in their body, really, be mindful of not sort of dismissing that as being not important. It is something that shouldn't be there. And the fact that it's there anyway gives the possibility that it could morph, change, and become something else. So I'm very mindful of saying to people, brain tumors and brain cancer are the sort of diagnoses that strike fear into your heart. You can't cut out a brain. You can't transplant a brain. You can take as much of the tumor as you can, and then you have to weigh up those options like Naomi spoke about how much do you take and what are the possible consequences of how that will leave you physically, or indeed death. So it's hard because you don't have very many options with the brain. So benign or cancerous, please be mindful that this is a very difficult journey for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Cherrie, you are educating us and sharing so much necessary information, on an emotional level. I mean, I guess that's why you're a counselor, because you're counseling us on how to even communicate with people that are going through this struggle, and that's important.
Yeah.
Language is important, and how we treat people that are living with it.
Yes.
And people that have lost people.
Yes.
And there are so many different aspects there that we've touched upon today. So I'm so thankful that you've come and shared this with us. And I'm sure that Critter is super proud of you.
Oh, I hope so. And I'm so grateful, Ria. Thank you, because we met so randomly, right? So randomly, that you took the time to read the book, and I'm so grateful that you did that and offered me this opportunity. So thank you so much. And I think, Critter, I am constantly being directed into places to meet people, to have conversations. I think something other than me is doing this. If it's him, thanks, mate. I will just keep saying yes to whatever presents.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
So in light of what I ask every guest that's on the show, what does summoning your superhuman mean to you, Cherrie?
Summoning my superhuman. Okay. Okay, I think I just said it almost. I think summoning my superhuman is trusting that I can say yes, that I can try things, that I don't have to judge myself about the outcomes, and that I will be led. When I trust, I will be led to do that superhuman thing, like write a book with all that fear of imposter syndrome running around in my head, because it's okay. It's okay. I just have to give it a go. Give it a red hot crack. That's it. That's how I summon my superhuman. Just give it a red hot crack. See where it takes you.
Well, it's taking you down
You're
a beautiful.
crying, darling.
I think it's just an accumulation of everything we've spoken about. It's just starting to make a break for it. I think.
And to remember that you are strong enough to live the life you've been given, however that looks.
Yeah.
Whatever that means to you. Whatever that means to you, just do it. Oh no, that's Nike. No.
It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I mean, look, strong enough to live. If people know me as well, I'm all about, strong strength.
Yes.
So I don't believe that it's a coincidence that you and I crossed paths.
I don't either. I don't either. It was meant to be, written in the stars.
Absolutely. And I think collectively, Cherrie and I will put together some resources and pop them in the show notes for you all.
Thank you.
Click on whatever is pulling you in the direction of.
Yes.
So
lovely.
let us put that resource together for you, and use it as you will. And I hope that you will buy a copy of Critter's Choice.
Buy a book.
Please
support brain cancer and brain tumor research, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thank you once again for sharing with us,
Ria.
Everything. Thank you so much.
Gorgeous girl. Thank you.
And thank you all for listening, and show some love for Cherrie. Virtual claps. Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Beautiful. Thank you.